Now, the challenge with this guest speaker is that she's been here more than once, and every single time that we start telling you about her background, we can't complete it all. It's just because her accomplishments, her talents just fill more than one page, okay, of everything. So every time we introduce her, you're going to hear something a little bit new about her. But Dr. Karmen Smith, I'm going to share with you, she's got more initials after her name than anybody I can think of. Dr. Karmen Smith, MSW, LCSW, DD. I mean, my goodness, she's also a CEO. That, I think a lot of people know there. But she's a metaphysical minister. She's a spiritual teacher. She's a mental health therapist, and she is the author of the book called The I Am Solution, and which is a beautiful step-by-step spiritual psychological journey through her own trauma onto triumph. I could go on, but I'm looking forward to introducing her even later on, so we can have even more things to share about her. But right now, please join me in a warm welcome to our beloved Dr. Karmen Smith.
Thank you. Let me take you in. It's been a minute. I think I was here in June, and so that's a very long time. So let me take you in. How are you guys doing? You look beautiful. I'm doing awesome and in heaven all the time, and in heaven now that I'm with you all. My topic today is healing is the discovery of the divinity within. Now, I ran across that quote from Ernest Holmes, and what stuck out to me was discovery, which means that it's there, but it's lost. It's like you lost your keys, and now you have to go discover where they are. So it's not saying that you have to create something. It's that we have to discover something that's already there. So divinity is already within us. And we have to discover it, and when we do, we're healed. Now, when I say healed, you might think physical. Yeah, okay, think physical. You might think mental health. Yes, think mental health. But I want to talk about all of those things wrapped up in how you see the world. That can be healed. Now, I don't know if you know this, but especially in the United States, we have a racism problem. Yes, I said it. Whew, I'm glad I got that out of the way. Because I want to use this in the context of healing is the discovery of the divinity within. And until we discover our own divinity, we're going to continue to have heinous racism. Can I get a round of applause on that? Because I read that quote from Ernest Holmes, and I just start putting it on things that need to be healed. And I said, yes, that would be healed if we found our own divinity. And I want to talk about how heinous racism is because it changes how we see each other. It changes how we treat each other. And Ernest Holmes and the people on this stage have been talking about the divinity is within us, and it changes our thoughts. And it does. And when we don't have it, it creates thoughts of fear and the other. Let me tell you something. I was doing a practice. I started it probably about 10 years ago. Every morning, I started writing down, who am I? I am, and I would just fill it in from the ether, from God speaking to me. And I would just fill in the blank. And then I would say, my purpose is, and I would fill in the blank. And do you know, for the first year, I would say, my purpose is to help others. And then the second year, I couldn't write others because that was false. There is no other. Let me explain that. The creation story, you've probably heard it before. There was this big light, and it was God. And then it splintered off into little lights onto this 3D plane. It's like a prism when you put a light through a prism, what comes out on the other side is all the rainbow colors. So that's us. We're light, we're God, but then we wanted to be splintered. We want to be separate. We wanted to see what life would be like without God. Crazy, right? So we come down to this earth, and we're not separate. We're still the light, but there are all of these things that make us think we're separate and keep us in fear. And one of them is to say, blacks are this, Muslims are this, Hindus are this, all of this crazy nonsense. And we come up with this concept called other. And I don't need to tell you about Democrats and Republicans, do I? Because I hope you're putting that all in the same soup, because it is silly soup. And, right? And so we think we're separate, and it is an illusion. So after 2 years, I couldn't write other because, Karmen, there's no such thing. That is a construct to keep us in fear. And when we're in fear, we're not in the mind of God. And when you're not in the mind of God, let me show you what happens. I have a slide that will show you frequency. So these are those rainbow colors I was telling you about. The lower ones are root chakra. These are the ones that have to do with fear and separation and guilt and shame. And the reason we don't talk about racism is because we don't want anybody to feel guilt and shame. That's not the purpose of talking about it. The purpose of talking about it is to have the courage to look at it and see how we are dismembered. And then once we have the courage, we can move right on up there. And that's where those creative, wonderful divinity thoughts come from. This is the mind of God when you start talking about joy and peace and how you can remember who we are. Because there are forces out there that want to keep you down here, and this is destructive. And we want to move everybody within our hearts. But if our hearts are in blame and guilt and shame, it affects the other person. And remember I said there is no other? So whatever I feel, it's called entanglement. It's going to affect you. So why would somebody want to keep somebody else down in an oppressive inferiority thing when actually it's going to affect you negatively too, but you just don't know it? You see, we're all one. And if you put your foot on somebody's neck, it's going to affect you too. That brings me to 2020 with George Floyd. 9 minutes. We first thought it was 8 minutes, and that was pretty bad. Then when they really counted, it was 9 minutes on a person's neck while they're wanting to breathe. Now, nobody wants to look at it. Nobody wants to face it. But what it can bring up in people is a lot of anger, shame, and guilt. Well, we can stay down there, but we'll destroy each other. It's called entanglement. What do? Well, I can tell you what I did. My son is in his 20s, and when that happened, he was filled with rage. He was filled with shame. Why don't people like the color of my skin? Why is the color of my skin something to be feared? And if you look at the media, if you look at all of the crazy propaganda we've been taught, you can understand that it's all instruction in the matrix. And so I didn't want my son to be filled with anger. I didn't want my son to have low self-esteem. And so what I did was, during the pandemic, is I said, you know, there's lots of marches going on, and I don't have a problem with marches. We'll go march. But why don't we do this also? we made up some cards on the kitchen table, and they said, I love you. And they said, you know, I have compassion for you. It said things like, we're the same. How are you doing today? I care about you. So we had about 50, maybe 100 cards that we had made up. And we put a big placard on our car, one of those magnetic placards, and it said, love is all there is. And we got in our car and we headed to the national parks. So we went to Utah. We went to Nevada. We went to Idaho. We went to Montana. And we were handing out cards. Now, these are white places. But we didn't want our heart to be closed, and I didn't want my son's heart to be closed. I didn't want him going to a therapist because I'm a therapist, and he was depressed. So I said, let's go out and let's be love. Let's get in the mind of God. Let's go and show people that, yeah, this was a horrible thing that happens. And the United States has a cancer of racism, but I'm not going to be stuck in anger, and I'm not going to be stuck in fear. I'm going to go out and I'm going to show who I am, but not just who I am. It's who everybody is, regardless of the color of their skin. How crazy is that? We talk about that in Science of Mind. We talk about how our thoughts follow our action. But every day, are you remembering? We went on a trip to remember who we are and who you are, who we all are. And when things come up on TV that try to and if we don't look at racism because we're afraid to go into shame or guilt about what's going on and what has happened in history, then we're going to stay in destructive mode. It's not that time anymore. This is a time to bring it to the surface, to talk about it, to embrace it. And wonderful things happen when you do that. I just had a beautiful prayer just before service, and Hazel said to me as we were praying, we have divine blood within us. This is a Caucasian woman. I think I'm African American. This is what they tell me this is. It's melanin. And it's a skin coating that protects you from the sun. And oftentimes we're called sun-kissed. But I think in this galaxy, in this 3D dimension, they call it all kinds of names. But let me just tell you, we have divine blood in us. We are from God's stuff, stardust. We have the mind of God in us. We are vessels of love, joy, peace. And when you get it, they call that enlightenment. When you combine yourself and align yourself with the one, which we all are, we just have to discover it again, then we are one with God. And I can say, as I'm still, I am God. When I'm still, I am God. And when I say that, I'm not just saying it about me. I'm giving you permission to discover it within you. I love you guys so much. You feel that, right? Precious, precious, precious. Let's take a good breath right here. And let's love on each other. So as we begin to let this all seep in to every cell of our body, we allow ourselves to be the most powerful being, which is the realization of who we've always been. We are all divine love, divine joy, with divine peace. That's who we've always been. We take a deep breath. In this silence, we present also a covenant to remember. So each day, we take those parts of ourselves, and this could be moment by moment, those parts of ourselves that have been programmed a certain way, and we rewrite the script, because now we have permission to know who we are. We are divinity. It is not blasphemous to say and state who you are and who you've always been. It is a joy. And so each day we find ways to remember, and taking out that other out of our vocabulary. We are entering into an age where we cannot deny the oneness. This is what gives us supreme power. That we are not afraid of it. We embrace it. We own it. And we are enlightened by it. We will, and we are remembering. And so it is. Press, okay.
Isn't she absolutely magnificent? You honor and bless us. And I'll also mention, if you want to just get to know Dr. Karmen a little bit more with her teaching, you have a workshop coming up. It's 2 weeks, on Saturday, September 24th. It's, I'm going to let you give the name of it. It's from 9 to 12. What is the name?
It's about my book, The I Am Solution, and I'm going to be talking about how fear is just a construct. It is nothing, really, but a powerful construct. But we can get through it and get to the love of God within us.
Yes, it's Walking with Illuminated Power. And you already have 10 people who've signed up already. I'd love to see the list a little bit longer for her. Oh, so thank you so much again. Oh, you know, one of the joys that we have here in this center is being able to provide these sort of wonderful guest speakers. And so at this time, I'm going to ask the ushers to please step forward, because this is our time now in supporting this center and all that we do with our operations, with our guest speakers, all the building maintenance that goes on.